Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com. Time for the Hurricane Outlook and discussion. It is Monday, the 19th of September. Can you believe it? We're almost to astronomical fall. That's coming up in just a couple of days. But it's time for the Hurricane Outlook and discussion here. We're going to talk about Fiona. Absolutely one for the record books. I'm going to have a little bit of a soapbox moment about that, really emphasizing impacts again. And this is very devastating for Puerto Rico. Just about 5 years after Maria, it was also very devastating. Just a terrible situation down there, and it's not over yet. It's still raining in parts of Puerto Rico, and Fiona now just moving off the coast of the Dominican Republic and into the Atlantic, where it is poised to strengthen quite significantly over the next several days. And then on top of that, we do have a new area now trying to develop. It will looks like it's going to get going here in the next few days. We need to look at that as the season definitely trying to make up for lost time. All right, so let's take a look at the broad view here. This is of no consequence really at all, except maybe to any marine interest that happen to be out quite literally in the middle of the Atlantic. There is Fiona now just coming off the coast of the Dominican Republic, finding a very favorable thermodynamic environment in the southwest Atlantic. This is going to go on to become the season's first major hurricane. I am almost certain of it. Earl was a little bit iffy. This one's got all the makings of a very powerful hurricane. And then here's the new disturbance that we're going to really have to watch closely in the coming days, and you can see why. It'll be impacting first our friends in the Windward Islands as primarily a rainmaker. Yes, that's got to be emphasized first and foremost, and certainly some squally conditions. We're going to get to that, but this is, again, just a quick look at what we are watching here. Here's Madeline in the Eastern Pacific. That's going to move on out. I'll show you that on our track map in just a moment. And then these areas are just a pair of additional disturbances in the Eastern Pacific, part of this overall kind of convoluted pattern out here of a lot of different pieces of energy competing to try to develop. The water temperatures have cooled off out here because of all the activity, so it's going to be harder and harder to get a real intense hurricane going forward, which nobody in Mexico is complaining about that. All right, so the satellite animation, courtesy Tropical Tidbits here. Clearly, there's Fiona right there. That's going to ramp up rather quickly out over the Atlantic after lashing Puerto Rico yesterday. Still doing it today. You can even see one of those strong bands right there, and that's tapping moisture all the way down just off the coast of South America, and that is a huge fetch of moisture. And we'll show you this in a minute on radar as well. There's the disturbance out in the open Atlantic, really of no consequence to speak of. And then we got to watch this little innocuous looking feature here. You say to yourself, well, that doesn't look like a big deal. Well, it's not yet. And this is what I talk about when I mention, we look at these tropical waves that come off Africa. They don't do much out in the deep tropics. And there's all this talk of a dead, busted season. It's too dry, nothing's going to happen. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden it looks like something could happen. Things change in just a matter of days. And just as an example of that, lesson number 1 today, about a week ago, in fact, the disturbance that became Fiona, that was cruising through this way. We all remember that. And I remember looking at the upper level wind pattern for this area and then on downstream from there. And it was highly unfavorable, just this wall of shear on both the GFS and the Euro for about 5, 6, 7 days out from that time frame. And we thought, yeah, it's probably not going to do much. There's just crazy shear. Even people on social media were talking about it, looking downrange from that point in time. They said it looked more like El Nino out there. And they were right. Just looking at the shear maps, it looked very, very inhospitable for something like Fiona to even happen. And, well, I think the satellite picture here and what we saw yesterday in Puerto Rico speaks for itself. In just a few days, 3, 4, 5 days, the pattern changed, and now it's going to be very favorable over the southwest Atlantic to give us a strong hurricane. And then it looks like a very favorable pattern is just going to sit here for maybe the next week or so, and that means we really have to watch this next system closely, as we are also keeping an eye on Fiona. The next area that we will be concerned with, of course, will be Bermuda, and then potentially up here in Newfoundland, Atlantic Canada, as Fiona moves up in there. This is not just about the United States, and I think most people that watch the videos on my channel realize that. It's about the impacts And it's not, there's islands out here. People live on these islands. There's shipping interests, you name it. Tropical cyclones affect way more than I think a lot of people really understand. All right, so here it is this afternoon on the high-res, visible clearly. The eye right there, just now coming off of Dominican Republic after just blasting Puerto Rico yesterday and the Virgin Islands over here, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, Vieques, and then, of course, Puerto Rico, especially the southern half down here, really got, I don't want to say annihilated. That's a little bit hyperbolic, but boy, the feeder bands that were coming in, and there's still one right here yesterday, that was just relentless. And that flow that comes up over these mountains here really wrings out the moisture. And we've seen the videos coming out on social media, absolutely horrifying. I mean, it is truly frightening when you have that much water coming at you from these streams where it focuses it. It rages through there. I mean, look, water made the Grand Canyon, for goodness sakes. And if it can do that, it can really wreck your day from 10, 12, 20 inches of rain in a short period of time, which is what Fiona gave us. So I just think these categories, that old Saffir-Simpson scale, I know it is ingrained in generations of people. That is a wind scale for damage potential. Category 1, the lowest. Category 5, the highest. It tells you absolutely nothing about the rainfall. And it tells you nothing inherently in the Saffir-Simpson scale about storm surge. Also a very, very efficient killer and damaging agent for property. Rainfall, though, really does get left out of the conversation of the general public. The Weather Service, the Hurricane Center, and local officials do a great job of communicating the threat of rain. But I think we look at rain as being more of a cleansing, wonderful thing that we need to sustain life, and we don't think of it as, if there's too much of it, too much of a good thing can be problematic. So I've always pushed it, especially since I've been out in the field year after year after year, seeing flooding impacts all the way back to the very beginning of my career. Hurricane Floyd in 1999 was a great example. Several since then, including Harvey, Matthew, Florence, and there are others. Imelda was just a tropical storm, a weak tropical storm, and it was $1 billion disaster for parts of southeast Texas just 2 years after Harvey. We must pay more attention to and think about too much rain, especially in some of these island countries down here, but certainly for the United States as well. All the urban development, all the paving over, and look, I'm not trying to push some environmental change. We just need to think and react accordingly and not act surprised when this happens. The amount of moisture in the atmosphere is ridiculous. It got wrung out, and we're seeing it here with a slow-moving hurricane. And that was the other aspect to it. Fiona was moving quite slowly through there, and that just made things worse. All right, so once the radar catches up here, I only did 15 frames, I think, from Dr. Mark Nissenbaum's site, just to further illustrate this issue here. Look at that. Still a very heavy rain band over Puerto Rico. Pretty solid band here in the Mona Passage as well. And the way Fiona is, the eye of Fiona is up here. It's out of the radar range. This is pretty far away. And there's one last little area that went through the Virgin Islands there near St. Thomas, I believe, and just to the western side of St. John maybe. But at least that area is starting to clear out. The main feeder band is really right here. And I'm worried that if it treks east any, as Fiona starts to move, it could encroach again on western Puerto Rico. I mean, it's not over. It's going to continue to rain there, at least for the next 18, maybe 24 hours. Not what you need to see for sure. All right, track map on our interactive site here. There is Madeline in the eastern Pacific. Again, really not much of a concern to speak of. And so we will certainly be watching Fiona over here in the Atlantic. And as we zoom in, we can see it is just now leaving the Dominican Republic, now sitting out over the southwest Atlantic. It could veer close enough over here to give parts of the Turks and Caicos maybe hurricane conditions. There's Grand Turk right there. It's a little small island. And again, the beauty of this map that our good friend Will Woodgate put together for us, and the background, I'm just a map guy. This is great. It's just great for telling a story. And the story here is, look, you can really zoom in like a boss, right, and just see what's going on. That's the center of Fiona right there. That's what that 2 is. That is projected to be what time? Well, we can click on it. It'll tell you. So this will be tomorrow morning at around 8 a.m. Eastern Time as a solid Category 2 potentially. So Grand Turk, if this follows the exact path, would have some northwest winds there as this goes by, and even over on the eastern side of the Turks and Caicos proper. All right, so not out of the realm of possibility that you get in on some hurricane conditions here. We have a little distance calculator as well that Will baked in there. There we go. It's about, the center, not even 30 miles away from Grand Turk. That's the center of the eye. That is what the maps plot, whether it's ours, the National Hurricane Center, any popular apps, anything you see on TV. Those little center points, that's the center of the center. That is what is plotted. And as we all know, that eye wall could be in the whole eye, something like that. It just depends. That's all baked into the discussion and the forecast discussion about the radius of maximum winds or how far out the hurricane force winds extend. Bottom line, though, interest here, especially in Grand Turk, tomorrow morning is not going to be very pleasant. From there, though, it scoots on up to the north and eventually turns to the northeast and will approach, let's back this out, we got a tile missing there. It'll approach Bermuda, and how close it gets to Bermuda obviously remains to be seen. You see these threes here, it is expected to become a major hurricane. There's a solid trough of low pressure moving out across, let's back this out even more. Big old trough's going to be dipping in a short wave up here, and that's going to help to sweep and turn Fiona away from the United States. It'll bring some cool, refreshing air to parts of the east if you're into that. I like summer myself, so the longer we can delay it, the better. Let's just go straight to winter and all of the excitement of winter storms. That's the other thing we do in the off season. But we're still in the on season. There's Bermuda and the center there. That's the center line. I don't want people looking at this, and people in Bermuda, they're pretty darn smart. They know, oh, it's going to pass well to our west, so we have nothing to worry about. Well, that is absolutely not the case, because Fiona will probably grow in size. They tend to expand their wind field when they get to these higher latitudes. And if it goes through what's called an eye wall replacement cycle, where the small, well-defined inner core that's currently in existence, and this is something that is still a mystery to all of the scientists out there, why these even happen. Why can't it just stay in a steady state the whole time? We don't know. So what happens is that inner eye wall will tend to collapse as an outer area of wind, called a wind maximum, develops, chokes off that inner eye wall, and becomes the new eye wall. The result is, and just keeps cycling over and over as long as they have warm water and a favorable atmosphere to work with. But the result is you get a larger wind field usually when that happens, until it contracts again. So you get this breathing and exhaling, inhaling and exhaling kind of thing with these intense hurricanes. And if that happens, and you get a larger wind field as it approaches Bermuda, then Bermuda could certainly see hurricane conditions down the road, something we need to consider. And I am considering it very much. Right now I have plans to go to Bermuda to cover those impacts. Certainly those plans can be changed if it's going to be farther away. But for now, I am scheduled to fly to Bermuda Wednesday with one of my colleagues, one of our supporters actually, and we will be working with several people that we know there if we need to. We'll see how it all shakes out. But right now the plan is to cover as best we can what happens with Fiona in Bermuda. Water temperatures, this is the anomaly map. That's the leftover wake of Earl. And boy, it really did a number up here in the far North Atlantic. And again, coincidentally, is it cause and effect? I don't know. We can certainly see that these water temperatures up here that used to be all the way over here, it was just solid, darkest red you can do on the scale. Now they've been hacked out by Earl, and it's almost on the left side. What an extreme change. From 5 above to 5 below Celsius in just a matter of a couple of weeks here. It kind of sends a shock through the system, and now we're seeing much more favorable conditions down here. Coincidence? I don't know. I don't have research associates. I can't go in and spend hundreds of hours and funding on, yes, it's absolutely because of what happened with Danielle and Earl, but it's just an interesting coincidence that once we took that heat out up there, now the balance has changed, it seems, and certainly conditions are favorable. That is a fact. We've got Fiona, we've got this next system. And speaking of all of that, Fiona will track through this area right here roughly and it will have plenty of anomalously warm water, warmer water temperatures than it should be. And then the new system that's developing coming through here, perhaps, also warmer than average water temperatures. It's just the pattern is ripe now. It took a little longer. No, we're not going to have 20 named storms and 10 hurricanes, probably. But the season being a bust and dead and no impacts, well, not so much. And we can see here people talking about this next system as I move on to that. Andy Hazelton, been watching it. Other people talking about it. Storm 2K elsewhere. The message board there. Been around a long time, that message board. And we can see the GFS was on it. And now the ECMWF from today also on it. These are just some different graphics that Andy was tweeting as I was assembling the different tabs that I wanted to show you today. There is Fiona in the Euro. And we're going to look at that more in a moment. And then there's the next system. This is 3 days out in time. Just to show you, when people say, well, I don't believe it until the Euro shows it. Well, the Euro shows it. So there you go. It's also on the Outlook map, as I talked about earlier. All right. There's the disturbance right there, by the way, that we need to watch on the vorticity. And these are the other features that are just dotted around the Atlantic right now. This is kind of linear in nature. I wouldn't worry about it. And there, of course, is Madeline over, or Madeline, however you say it. Always with the names, right? By the way, this next system, assuming it does go on to develop, it'll be Gaston. So all of you Beauty and the Beast fans out there, we had Fiona, and now we're going to have another. Fiona was DreamWorks, of course. The joke is Shrek, and of course Gaston would be Disney with Beauty and the Beast, at least that one iteration of it. Anyway, forget all that. The next one is Gaston. That was my point. Let's move on. All right, so the GFS from 12Z today. Now, this is an important part of the atmosphere I want to show you, and really focusing on Bermuda and the Turks and Caicos down here, okay? This is the 10-meter wind. And 10 meters, how high is that? Anybody remember? Hands up. You in the back there. 10 meters is about 33 feet or so. 33, 35 feet. I don't remember the exact number. But 10 meters is roughly 30 to 35 feet, okay? So most three-story buildings would be 10 meters. We could all agree with that. Cars are about 2 meters, or about 6 feet in their height off the ground. So just a few more meters above a car would be where this wind speed forecast is from the GFS. We're all on the same page here. Most of science is in metric, just so you know. So this is 10-meter wind and mean sea level pressure in millibars. Now, the GFS here initializing it, probably a little bit too weak, but that doesn't matter. It's going to get out over the Atlantic here, and it's going to take off. And you can see there, and unfortunately I can't zoom in too tight here. We'll look at it on the H-Wharf model in just a moment because that does. But you get pretty close to some hurricane conditions there. You just look at the legend over here, the scale. It's going to pass close enough, the core, to the Turks and Caicos through tomorrow that, yes, they could have hurricane conditions there. It's possible. Then Fiona moves up into the Atlantic. It deepens significantly, 940s. I mean, wow. And then look at that wind field expand. That's what I'm talking about. It starts to grow in size, and then that other area in yellow is Bermuda. And you see the center stays away from Bermuda, sure, but that southeast quad just gets those hurricane force winds in there, and it's just going to be constant. There's no break from the eye passing over, and so that could really give a prolonged period of onshore flow to the southern part of Bermuda, and then as it goes by, it still starts to, eventually it changes to out of the west, but, you don't need a direct hit, and look how large that wind field gets near Bermuda, and Bermuda is right there, folks. That is not that far from that well-developed eye in the model. That is remarkable to see that. And I'm sure you can see this starting to sneak in here in the Southeast Caribbean, after first passing through parts of the Windward Islands. So obviously we're going to need to watch that. Let's just back that up. You see the evolution of that system there. And let's just take this out to 5 days. Yes, we need to watch that. The GFS pretty aggressive with that next system just north of the ABC Islands here in the Southern Caribbean. Now, real quick, the H-Wharf, I do want to back this up. and show you HWRF is the Hurricane Weather Research Forecast model right here. And we click on Fiona. And again, this is the same area of the atmosphere, the 10-meter wind and the mean sea level pressure. All right. So this is what it looks like going forward. This is nice and zoomed in. The nested grid model, as it's called, it's focused just on Fiona here. Now the HWRF leaves the Turks and Caicos unscathed from hurricane conditions, so that would be good. They're on the west side, and presumably it would not be too much of a problem from the HWRF. So we move this on out, get this up towards Bermuda here, and that's getting close right there. There's Bermuda. You can see it looks like a fish hook, and there the HWRF nabs the hurricane force winds later in the period, just barely. But that's a pretty large eye, kind of lopsided, and this is 90 hours out. It could be farther away, it could be closer, it could be right on top. So that's why I'm not sure 100% yet about my plans for Bermuda, but certainly interest there. Need to be watching this closely, as they, I am sure, are doing so. All right, finally, the Euro, just to compare what's going on. There's the impulse coming out of the Atlantic, the Southwest Maine Development Region. There is Fiona. And let's just put this out to the next 5 days. You can see what happens on the track for Fiona. It's a little bit farther away from Bermuda, so maybe a little bit of hope there for keeping Bermuda out of the worst of it. This is 96 hours. Then finally by day 5, very, very similar to what the GFS was showing. It's just a little bit farther along, so a little bit faster by day 5 than what the GFS was showing. But that is pretty good consensus. The CMC, that's the Canadian, the GFS, the Euro, they all show this system developing. And of course, the caveat, I know everybody can go look at 384 hours and see where it ends up. And hey, do that at your own peril. Don't let it worry you if you do that. You know, there's risks with that. 5 days. Remember what I said at the beginning, an hour ago when we started this. What are we going to know in 5 days? 5 days before Fiona is where it is. You know, and going through the Caribbean, again, we knew, oh, there's going to be too much shear down there. There's no way that's going to happen. Look how that turned out. So if you watch the models and you look at them beyond 5 days, do so at your own risk. Seriously, it's not worth it. At least know what you're looking at, all right? All right, so we'll be watching Fiona very closely. Again, my plan is to go to Bermuda for it, if needed. I can cancel the plane ticket. I bought the one where you pay $90 and you can get it refundable and whatever. It's all logistics that we have to deal with. There's testing we got to do for the COVID requirements over there. A lot involved, and we will know absolutely sure by this time tomorrow. It's the go or no-go time because the plane leaves 7 o'clock Wednesday morning, so I better know. All right, well, let's get this online for you all. As always, thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate it. Again, I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. That's our brand. I'll be back with more for you starting tomorrow morning.